This is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Interarbor Solutions, and you're listening to Briefings Direct. Our next technology innovation thought leadership discussion focuses on how major new trends in technology are translating into disruption, and for the innovative, business opportunity. From invisible robots to drones as data servers, from virtual reality to driverless cars, technology innovation is faster than ever, impacting us everywhere, broadening our knowledge, and newly augmenting processes and commerce. We'll now explore the ways that these technology innovations translate into business impacts, and how consumers and suppliers of services and goods can best prepare. To learn more about the future of business innovation, we're joined by two guests. Please join me in welcoming Greg Williams, Deputy Editor of Wired UK. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, Dana.
We're also here with Alex Atzberger, President, SAP Ariba. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Greg, you see a lot of trends happening, a lot of change in the industry. People are talking about the pace as well, picking up quicker than ever. What are some of the major disrupting trends that you see in technology? And then which of those do you think are going to be the most impactful for business people?
Sure. Thanks, Dana. Yeah, I mean, you listed a whole bunch of things there, which I think are all incredibly important in moving forward. I think that they are near-term in ways that maybe sometimes people don't consider them to be near-term. And I think that technology shifts tend to be almost things we don't notice. They happen very, very kind of like, well, they're not happening slowly any longer, they're happening quickly, but we're almost kind of like not seeing them. So we talk about something like robotics. Okay, so robotics now, you can see all kinds of incredible things. You can see in Japan a robot carer who can lift elderly people out of a bed and can care for them in that way. Or you can see slightly sinister videos from Boston Dynamics of kind of robot dogs running along that look pretty scary. But actually, what most innovation looks like, I think, is things that we almost don't notice are there. So, for instance, this is kind of a boring example, but an ATM is kind of a robot of a kind. A vacuum cleaner is, an elevator is. So I think that some of those things we don't necessarily notice, they're not as dramatic maybe as we think. The other thing I think is happening, sorry, I should just caveat that and say everything is moving very, very quickly right now. And I think that that's why it's hard to make kind of like very kind of clear predictions. I think the other thing that's important is it's kind of joining up of lots of different technologies. And I think that that's the biggest trend that I see right now. Because we can talk about, you know, servers in the sky, or we can talk about autonomous mobility, augmented reality. But it's all about kind of connecting the dots. So one of the things that I think is really interesting now is the way that car manufacturers are all technology players now. So every automotive manufacturer right now is figuring out, okay, basically what we have here is a computer on wheels. We have to figure out how, when people drive into a parking lot, how can they make an automatic payment via the vehicle? How can the vehicle know that people's groceries are ready to be picked up at a certain point? So the key things I'm seeing, although it's nice to list kind of robots and autonomous vehicles and, you know, other kind of very kind of clear technological shifts, I think the things that we're really seeing is this speeding up and this coming together and this kind of like joining and this connecting of the dots, basically all based on three things: ubiquitous computing, mobile technology, and the cloud. And those are the kind of the three things that underpin pretty much everything I think that we're going to be talking about in the next 20 minutes.
You know, Alex, when I hear Greg, I'm thinking business networks. Although people in the consumer space might not think of them as business networks, it's the network effect, it's intelligence shared, it's linking things up and allowing the pace to increase and people to share knowledge and activities. What do you see as the crossover from the consumer space and the behaviors and culture of technology, and then how does that translate to the business idea of a network?
Yeah, I was recently in Dubai, and they have a Museum of the Future that they're launching this year, or starting this year. And in the Museum of the Future, you can see what it would be like to be going to a doctor in the future to get a new body part, basically, to jump higher or move faster. And you look at these type of ideas, and I think the business embraces the same sort of idea to say, how can I augment my business to actually run smarter and be better? What are things that I can augment myself on to actually use data better? That you can no longer be an island, yeah, as a company, and you need to share ideas, and you need to share innovation with others, and you need to be connected. And when you're connected, you can transform your business, you can do new things, you can take on new capabilities, and you can augment your business. So what we see a lot is that companies ask us, okay, now that I'm connected, for instance, to a network, how can I get data out of that network to improve my business processes and do things better? And that's what I would basically call the augmented enterprise, to actually get augmented intelligence to that business.
You know, it also occurs to me that we're seeing different patterns, not only in adoption, but expectations, that people are seeing what a mobile device tied to a cloud that has deep learning capabilities and feedback loops that are, you know, applying the data back and forth. People are becoming ready for the next move. They want the technology to guide them. And they also don't want to take the time to learn a process. It has to be intuitive to them. So how do these human behavioral aspects of anticipating a proactive technological helping hand impact both us in our consumer space as well as what we would expect in our business environment? Right?
Yeah, I think simplicity is absolutely key to all technology. We have to think about the end user. The end user of the customer is always the most important thing in any kind of technology process. And I think that what Alex was talking about in terms of artificial intelligence, I think that what allows us, or it's going to allow us to do, is be a lot more predictive in terms of consumer behavior and customer behavior. So if you look at sort of like something like natural language processing now, some of the startups in that space who are working with, say, automotive manufacturers, to come back to my previous example, they will look at, trends on social media and elsewhere. They can look at import-export data maybe, and they can look at those predictive trends, those trends, and make predictions about, General Motors, their sales in, the next quarter. We can look at, from the sky, we can look at parking lots at, malls at Target and Costco and Walmart, and we can make predictions about, hey, you know what? I think the quarterly earnings report for Walmart or whatever is going to be pretty strong this quarter. I think that what we're looking at really is this kind of constant kind of connecting of the dots. And to Alex's point, like it's incredible accumulation of data, and that's the real tough thing for businesses right now, because every business understands. I don't think there's any business out there that doesn't understand the value of data. This phrase "big data" is one that you sort of hear at every single conference. But it's how can we possibly pass the value out of that? How can we use that data in a predictive way rather than as a lagging indicator? Most businesses historically have used data. It's kind of historical, right? So you're looking at sales reports. You're looking at whatever other data is important within your organization. How can we use all those external factors? I think is going to become increasingly important for businesses. Can we see how our competitors are doing by looking at the job postings that they have maybe? Or how can we see what their next move is in terms of manufacturing by looking at their import-export data? Can we look at the amount of money they're spending on Google AdWords so that we can and see what kind of keywords they're spending money on? So it's about that kind of, as I said previously, it's about that kind of connecting of the dots and bringing this information together, and also figuring out, having someone within your organization, I think, who is not going to get overwhelmed by this data, but is curating it and knows what's important to the enterprise and what's not important to the enterprise, because a lot of it isn't.
Now, user experience plays a huge role in how we can consume and make good on this technology, on this data, on this analysis. And what Greg said about simplicity can be deceiving. It might seem simple to the end user, but an awful lot has to happen in order for that effect to take place. So, Alex, one of the interesting things I've seen with Ariba, SAP Ariba, recently is this notion of guided buying. And I love that word guided, because you're anticipating the user, heading them off on complexity. But what does it take behind the scenes to actually make that happen?
There's a whole lot that it takes to get this going, but I think the idea of guided buying was always that we said, it's exactly that simplicity that all customers are asking us for. No, it's really about how do I actually make the user feel empowered and give the power to the user, but at the same time embed intelligence in the software. So what we did in our cloud applications is really think through every step of the process, starting with really monitoring how users were behaving with the system. So it's this design thinking approach, the deep empathy with the user. That's like the first point. The second point, though, then is also understanding what does the business actually want to accomplish. Because the business actually runs a business. So they have rules, methodologies, things that they want to achieve. So I was with one CPO and who told me, like, Alex, I look at this beautiful software, but you're making it too easy to buy. I don't want people to just go out and buy stuff, And I was like, you know what, that's absolutely the good point. But what we are doing is we're embedding the logic of buying, of the enterprise actually into guided buying. And I think that's what is the difference between B2C and B2B. In B2C, you can have that beautiful experience and you just want to make the experience so seamless that you obviously drive commerce. In B2B, you want to guide the commerce to be more relevant and fit your company goals. And that requires a slightly different approach to how you solve that problem. But we are obviously deeply committed, to solving that problem in the context of giving users as much freedom and choice as possible, but while making also business achieve their goals.
Can I just follow up on that? I think that Alex used a really great phrase, and it's one that we actually had a discussion about in the office, which is kind of the importance of design thinking within organizations. And I think it's when you think about software, you think about any technology, really, the user experience is your brand, right? So it's that people connect experiencing it. And I think that pretty much in every organization now, the design brief, and I say design with air quotes for anyone listening, is a really important part of the organization now. I think that maybe designers need to be brought in, whether they're software designers or whether they're kind of, in the B2C space, UX designers. They need to have a seat at the top table these days because they are such an integral part now of defining any kind of brand.
Maybe just one point on that is it's interesting. We hire a lot of designers into it now, SAP Ariba. But interestingly, a lot of the engineers come and basically say, you know what, no, we need to think about design as well. So it's not like design is still a separate department. At one point, design becomes part of what we call every Scrum team that basically builds the software. And an engineer should have a point of view as well in terms of what is good design. Because you could argue that there are some sites that don't necessarily look pretty, but they're really easy to use. And so it's not just about, the visualization and, the fonts, etc. It's about also how many clicks, what's the logic behind it. And that's where product people want to be product people. They don't want to just be, engineers or just designers.
I suppose another important element to this is not only that user experience where one size fits all, but a user experience where customization is brought to bear. And because of the technology, because of the intelligence, access to a vast cloud infrastructure, we can do that. And there are examples of customization at the individual worker level, where role-based and policy-based approaches can do that. We're also seeing with the Ariba, SAP Ariba Cloud, you're bringing master data, vendor data, for example, into the cloud, cleansing it, making it usable, but still keeping it germane to that particular company. So this isn't just a business app for everyone. Let's delve a little bit into this idea of customization specifically to a company and then even down to the individual user. How is that so important now in business applications, Alex?
So I think the promise of the cloud was always speed. And then what you gave up for the speed was the ability to customize, especially in enterprise systems. And what we are now saying is, what you can have a level of individuality and things that are important to you, either through configuration or through really extending the platform that you're on. And I think that's the power, obviously, of the technology that comes to bear when you look at platforms today. And I think that's what makes, if you look at Amazon Web Services, if you look at what SAP is doing with the HANA Cloud Platform, so essential, because it gives the capabilities to companies to actually customize further. But at the same time, we have a concept of like the private and the public persona. Because at the end of the day, there's some data that's private to a company, and then there's data that's publicly shared. And we need to be very sensitive of what's data is relevant in what context.
Greg, to me, one of the areas where business perhaps can get out in front of the technology curve, where the consumer side is typically where we think they're going to be fast and agile and innovative, is this idea of customization and anticipatory or predictive analytics benefits. It seems to be we're only scratching the surface here, because when I go on Netflix, they still can't pick shows that I really want to watch. When I go to Amazon and they have my box or my stuff, it's really just already things I've bought with a little bit of augmentation. If we can take this to the full potential of customization, and I think businesses can because they have access to the data and they can be policy-based in probably a better way than a mass consumer environment could, what's the potential here when the machines can really start getting us customization, predictive analytics, and apply that to how we get productive in our business sense? Strikes me as something quite significant.
Yeah, it is. I was talking to someone in a startup in California who is developing a sales tool. This person worked for many years at a very well-known enterprise that does sort of well-known sales tools. His new business is very interesting because it's trying to do what you described, but it's trying to do it by almost being a search engine for the entire business internet. And their claim, and this has to be verified anyway, their claim is that they're much more efficient than regular salespeople. So say you're trying to sell, I don't know, your product, your software product into a telco, you'll spend a lot of time learning about the person that purchases those services. You'll go to conferences. There's a lot of effort gone into this process. His startup suggests that they will be able to not just identify the companies that you're able to sell into, they'll be able to identify the actual individuals, and that it'll become a lot more kind of detailed in terms of this is what they're interested in, this is what they're not interested in, this is the conferences that they've been to. So increasingly, we'll have more and more intelligence on people. Now, fundamentally, though, that takes you only so far. You've got to actually have the right product, and you've got to have the right salesperson in order to go and be able to seal that deal. I think what we'll do is we'll get a long way there, but I think that fundamentally it's about, there are going to be hits and there are going to be misses. So to take your Netflix example, Netflix moved simply from being like a content delivery service to being a creative business by looking at this kind of Venn diagram of Kevin Spacey, Kevin Fincher, and it's Kevin Fincher, isn't it? And House of Cards from the UK. And they saw that there's this huge amount of people who love those three things. They were like, great, let's commission this series. So they use data in a very smart way there. But maybe you're not, I don't know, maybe you're not filling in, you're not tagging things enough, maybe you're not giving them enough information. They can only do so much. What they do know, though, is what you watch, when you watch it, where you stop, where you don't finish, where you fast forward, where you rewind. So they are collecting huge amounts of data. It might just take them a while to get there.
So Alex, to translate this to the business environment, the business network that your company is aligned with can be the determiner of how effective this new trend towards customization, anticipation, and being more of a science than an art for sales, for example, that Greg mentioned. This to me says the right network with the right information is a crucial decision for you. How does that work in terms of companies differentiating themselves based on who they work with in their ecosystem?
Yeah, first of all, I think any company that actually engages in a network and then captures the data to actually make better business decisions is already on that journey. And I think if you look at the social networks today, I think if you like 3 things on Facebook, Facebook knows more about you than your best friend. If you like more than 10 things, Facebook knows more than your spouse about you. So that's the logic. And I think the same happens in business networks as well. And what we see a lot is that businesses connect obviously to the networks to conduct global business, to find new market opportunities, and become much better at actually mining and understanding that data to become more pointed in terms of what solutions they actually want to provide to the market. But I think we are still at the very beginning of this trend, because I think we have if companies actually take that information. And we're working with companies, obviously, on doing this, but we call it data as a service, where they leverage the data itself to create more insight into their business, pursue better business opportunities, change their product offering, actually, and innovate, for instance, with their supplier base. Then we are impacting real change. And I think that's absolutely feasible today. But again, I think we're still early on.
Right. Any examples, Alex, of companies that really get this and that are showing some demonstrable benefits that are really tagging on innovation to what their businesses were traditionally, but taking it in a new direction based on some of these technological benefits that we've talked about? Poster children for innovation, perhaps.
So when I think about poster children for innovation, I mean, I think about companies who are really thinking about you have an infrastructure, for instance, with a network, what are other things I can do through this network in order to change my business, actually, new capabilities. So what I love is when we have customers who basically talk about the fact that they can actually change their industry, for instance, or that they say, like, we could actually change our entire supply chain. So we have one high-tech manufacturer who thinks about, okay, how can I actually get my demand signals much faster to my supplier base so that I can actually impact my end customer. So I like that thinking a lot.
Greg, last thoughts on what's to come, how technology and business combine to transform how we get things done and perhaps even improve our quality of life?
Well, that's obviously the fundamental kind of end result one hopes of all kind of like technological change, that people have better lives and we solve big problems. I think that looking forward, we're going to see, as Alex has been describing, this kind of real kind of joining of the dots. So they aren't necessarily going to be things that are dramatic, but we're going to see increasing amounts of sort of artificial intelligence, for instance, offering us kind of learnings that we maybe wouldn't have noticed otherwise. I was talking to a guy who worked in the security industry recently, and they do a lot of work for the Pentagon. And he was telling me that they did an analysis of ISIL tweets one week in August last year, and they noticed that most of them were about security, or they were about the kind of the security situation in various parts of northern Iraq and Syria, but they noticed an outlier that they'd never noticed before, and this was official ISIL accounts retweeting any mention of female fighters or women in ISIL. And what they noticed was that there was a big push by ISIL to sort of like recruit women. What happened sort of 6 weeks later, we have the first female suicide bomber in Europe, in Paris. Now, those things probably are not linked, but I think we are able to see things in the data now that we've never been able to see before, and I think that increasingly we'll be putting those things to use.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a BriefingsDirect Thought Leadership podcast discussion on how major new trends in technology are translating into disruption and for the innovative business opportunity. And we've heard how technology innovators translate into business impacts and how consumers and suppliers of services and goods can best prepare. So please join me in thanking our guests. We've been here with Greg Williams, Deputy Editor, Wired UK in London. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks so much, Dana. Really enjoyed it.
And also Alex Atzberger, President, SAP Ariba. Thank you, Alex.
Dana, thanks for the opportunity.
And a big thank you, too, to our audience for joining this SAP Ariba-sponsored Business Innovation Thought Leadership discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.